Part 11 of turning my 1980 Chevy LUV from this into this extended version. So we're going to pick up where we left off last time and tear this down the rest of the way. Also, I got my engine mounts in, which I'm super excited about. But before we get started, I need to go on a little side mission and pick up some tools. So I went to the local coffee shop and got not coffee, made a quick delivery.
There you go.
And then we stopped into my favorite store in the entire world. I grabbed a warranty replacement, and then this badass hydraulic puller, and then of course a couple other things that I definitely didn't need. So back at home I moved the engine out into the sunlight, and then struggled for about 15 minutes to get this pulley off, but eventually it just popped right off. With the pulley out of the way, we have access to the timing cover and then the oil pump. Then we can go ahead and remove the cam sprocket and timing chain, followed by the cam retainer. I then threaded 2 bolts in the end of the camshaft so that we could pull it out easier. And while being careful not to damage anything, it came right out. Next, I removed the cam position sensor and the oil pressure sending unit. Then I worked on pulling off the rear main seal housing, which I couldn't get all the way out with the engine stand in the way, but it'll come out when the crank comes out. I then flipped over the engine to get better access to the main caps, where I removed all the side bolts and top bolts holding on the main caps. I then actually had to use a pry bar very gently to pry these caps out because they were a little bit stuck. And after that, the crankshaft came right out. And then lastly, I removed all the main bearings, followed by the crankshaft position sensor. And now we are left with a completely bare block, and it's ready to go through the parts washer. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for part 12. Don't forget to give me a follow on TikTok, and please feel free to check out my Instagram and my YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe. Link in my bio. Here's part 12 of building Nasty LUV. In the last video we tore this block down. Now it's time to give it a hone and a bath. But first, off to Harbor Freight. After a little pull, we arrived in heaven, where I picked up a new stone hone. Now back at the house, it was time to start honing, so we lubed up the cylinders and got at it. It took a bit to get the correct technique, but I think this here was the key. After the hone, we wiped out the cylinders and repeated the same process to the other side, and that's a hone job done. I then enlisted the help of my girlfriend's brother to get the block in the back of my truck, which was a little bit of a struggle. I then boxed up the rest of the dirty parts and put them all in the back of the truck to be washed. Now being the next day, we're off to my work. I brought the block inside and cleaned off all the gasket mating surfaces before putting the block in the parts washer. It's better to scrape the gasket surfaces now because all the leftover debris will get washed off in the parts washer. With the help of a coworker, we heaved it into the washer. And while that was doing its thing, I cleaned up all the other parts in the solvent tank. Now just look at how clean that block is. And after struggling to get this thing out, I blew it all off with some compressed air. And afterwards, I double cleaned every cylinder with brake clean and oiled it all up so that it doesn't rust. And just look at that block. Now it's almost ready for paint and reassembly, but only after I order a bunch of parts from Texas Speed. Thanks guys for watching, and stay tuned for part 13. What's up guys, here's part 13 of building Nasty LUV. Recently I found water's been getting onto the passenger floorboard, and I suspect it's due to a large buildup of debris under this cowl. I'm also going to try to clean up the dash as best as possible without Goo Gone. So we grabbed our freshly cleaned tools thanks to Tobo Towels. Then we headed out to the truck to remove these wipers and the 4 screws that hold the cowl on. And I have a pretty good feeling there's going to be a lot of gunk under here. So we removed the left wiper arm nut, and then the right side. And then popped off the left wiper arm and the right. And then next it was 4 screws, and I'm surprised none of these were seized. Then off with the cowl. And look at that. Just as I had suspected, this thing is completely full of gunk. So I broke out the trusty shop vac and vacuumed up a bunch of the loose debris, and I wasn't able to get all of it, and that's why I had to remove these screens. And with those out of the way, I was able to vacuum up a lot more debris. I then repeated the same steps to the other side. And then finally, I blew it all out with compressed air. Now, I'm not positive this is going to solve my water intrusion issue, but just look at how clean that cowl is now. Then we started to reassemble. I put the screens back on, followed by the cowl, and then the screws that hold it in place. And then next, I put both of the wiper arms back on. And now that that's done, it's on to our next task. But before cleaning up the dash, I thought I'd remove this water stain. I put down some baking soda and then scrubbed the whole thing with tub towels, and it actually did a really good job. And now I was on to cleaning up the dash. Now my goal here was just to remove loose dirt. But surprisingly, the tub towels actually removed a lot of the old dried on dash adhesive. And I think if I had spent enough time, I could have removed all of it just with tub towels. But I was pretty happy with the result. Thanks for watching, stay tuned for part 14, and don't forget to check out tub towels. Here's part 14 of building Nasty Love. Since we're still waiting on parts, we're going to paint the 9-inch axle housing. But before we get into that, check this out. What if I told you this pickup truck behind me shares the same engine as a Hellcat? That's right, the 2021 Ram TRX 1500 has 702 horsepower and launch control from the factory in a pickup truck. But what if I told you have the chance to own one of these for far less than the $71,000 starting price? Friends over at CharityStars.com are partnering with GlobalGiving.org to make that all possible. GlobalGiving.org is a charity that connects nonprofits, donors, and companies from all over the world to accelerate community-led change. All you have to do is go to www.CharityStars.com/Aaron or follow the link in my bio or at the bottom of this video. And then once we're at CharityStars.com/Aaron, click Enter to Win, select your donation amount, scroll down, and enter all your info. And then once all the information is entered, we scroll down here to the promo code section and enter code Aaron100 for 100 free entries. And after all that, it's as simple as hitting donate. So now back to your regularly scheduled program. After getting the housing up off the ground, I flipped it over. I then taped off the hole where the center section goes and the ends of the axle housing tubes. Next, it was time to clean this thing up with some wax and grease remover. After it was clean and dry, I hit it with a tack cloth to try to get rid of any lint. Then I mixed the Rust-Oleum bare metal primer. And it was time to start spraying. I started off with this small gun, but the tip was too small, so I moved over to my larger gun. After a few coats, I was satisfied with the finish, and it was time for paint. For the top coat, I'm using flat black Rust-Oleum with a little bit of hardener. And I am by no means a professional painter, but I'm actually really happy with how this stuff laid out. After a couple heavy coats, this is how it laid out. I'm actually very satisfied with the final product, and I honestly didn't expect it to look this good. I just wanted to apologize for the lack of content recently. Every single part that I have ordered is still on back order, but I promise we'll get moving here pretty soon. Thanks guys for watching. Check out my Instagram and YouTube link in the bio, and stay tuned for part 15.
Here's part 15 of building Nasty Love.
Today we're going to be building the axle assembly. Also be sure to head over to my YouTube channel and subscribe. I just uploaded a 13-minute version of this exact video. Follow the link in my bio to get there. To start out today, I had to move all these boxes and get everything set up before I could start work. I laid out some microfibers to prevent scratches, pulled out the axle housing, and got straight to work removing slag from the inside of the housing. After I was satisfied with the cleanliness, I started installing these studs which hold the third member to the housing. And that took forever. Afterwards, I cleaned up the mating surfaces to prepare for silicone application, and once everything was clean, I broke out the 3-bond and started gooping. I made sure to lay a really thick bead because we definitely don't want this to leak. Next, I picked up the very heavy third member and installed it, making sure to tighten every nut to the torque spec of Guten Tight. And I never thought I'd say this, but that is sexy looking. It is one fine looking third member. Moving on, now it was time to get the axles installed. And first, I had to put in the axle seals. And I didn't do a great job installing this side. It was a little bit mangled, but I lubed it up, applied some silicone to the bearing race, and then very slowly and seductively slid the axle into the axle housing. I gave it a couple love taps with the rubber mallet, and it was installed. And then finally I put on the retainer plate. I then repeated the same process on the other side, but installed this seal without absolutely destroying it, put the axle in, the retainer plate on, and that thing was ready for brakes. And it's really starting to look like an axle assembly now. Up next, I started to install the caliper brackets. As the name implies, this is where the caliper bolts to. I installed the one on the other side, and again made sure to tighten them to the Guten tight torque spec. And now we were ready for rotors, which were interesting to install since they were multi-lug rotors, something that I have never seen before. But after figuring out one side, the other side just slid right on. And just like that, we were ready for calipers. I installed them, ensuring that the bleeder was facing upwards, and cinched it down with my electric ratchet. Then did the same exact thing to the other side. And after the last caliper pin was tight, that means that this job is now done. And it looks awesome. I can't wait to throw this thing in the truck. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out my YouTube, the link is in my bio, and stay tuned for part 16.